talking trade rumors here on today's 76ers Now. With the NBA trade deadline coming up this Thursday, we're going to get to the latest on Paul George, Caleb Martin, Gershon Yabusele, and everything we're hearing when it comes to the 76ers and some potential trade rumors. And so far this season, we've already seen, just in the past week or so, some major NBA trades going down. Luke Doncic in a blockbuster headed to the Los Angeles Lakers in exchange for Anthony Davis, and De'Aaron Fox headed from the Kings to the Spurs in a deal that also sent Zach LaVine from Chicago to Sacramento. So, if the Sixers do make a move this upcoming week before the deadline on the 6th, we're going to have you covered here on the show. If they make any type of trade at all, we will have a video for you guys here on the channel. We're approaching 21,000 subscribers here on 76ers Now, so do not miss out on the busiest time of the year on the NBA calendar. Hit that sub button, lock us in so you don't miss a thing. And so we'll get started here with the latest on Paul George, because a new report from Shams Charania, major news on Paul George. And here's what Shams had to say about Paul George and the Golden State Warriors. Shams said the Warriors are legitimately calling about every all-star player. You name the all-star player, the Warriors are probably calling on them. Paul George, they probably call, and they have called. They're making calls all over. They are dead set on trying to find another star player, superstar player with Steph Curry. That is another subplot to this trade deadline as well. So we talked a little bit about a Paul George trade here on the show, but I wanted to dive in a little bit more about, is this a real possibility? Paul George being sent out after just a few short months in Philadelphia. And look, there's no doubt Paul George has been a little disappointing this year, not quite what the Sixers were hoping to get when signing him to that huge max extension. Just 30 games played in the season. He's dealt with a lot of injuries, from the knee hyperextension in the beginning of the year to now this finger injury he's been dealing with as of late. But just 30 games, 17 points, 5.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, just 43% from the field, just about 36.5% from three. Not the usual efficient Paul George we've seen. And even last year, in his last season with the Clippers, one of his more efficient seasons he's had in quite a while, and he was able to stay healthy. So there was some hope that the Sixers could get that version of Paul George in Philadelphia, but it just has not been the case with him getting older. And I think there's really no signs that he can truly get back to that, right? So do you already now go and push that panic button? Because we've seen some games here and there from Paul George, but not quite at the consistent level you might be hoping to expect from a player that you're paying all this money. So will Daryl Morey already be saying, you know what, hey, I'll admit I was wrong. I'll admit I made a mistake in giving Paul George his money and get off this deal, because this contract that Daryl Morey gave Paul George is massive. Now, there is one caveat here, is that Daryl Morey promised Paul George he would not trade him in the first year of his contract. But we know Daryl Morey doesn't always hold true on his promises. Now, Paul George's contract, making $49 million this year, balloons up to the $50 million range next year, $54 million in 2026-27, and up to $56 million in the final year of that deal in 2027-2028. I think if you have an ability to get off that contract sooner rather than later, you take that chance, because this contract in the last couple of years of the deal could really hinder this team's ability to compete for a championship when you're paying Maxey and Paul George all this money. And to me, I can't imagine another team wanting to get out of this Paul George contract because of his age, injury history, and the money left on his deal and the years left on his deal. But the Warriors, by all accounts right now, seem desperate to get another star in there next to Steph Curry as he reaches the back few years of his career. And we know they wanted Paul George this past offseason. They tried to get him in a sign-and trade, but just weren't able to get that deal done. Of course, Paul George ended up signing in Philadelphia. And they also have been reportedly in on trying to get Jimmy Butler at this year's trade deadline, but Jimmy Butler has said he will not sign a long-term extension with Golden State. So now they're kind of out of that Jimmy Butler race. So where does that put Golden State? I think you take advantage of them really trying to get in another star in their desperation and make a deal to try to send Paul George to Golden State now. Thinking about this kind of move, is Morey feeling the pressure as well? Because Daryl Morey isn't the kind of guy who likes to admit when he's wrong, likes to admit his mistakes. But look, we've heard the reports of the Sixers possibly having Daryl Morey on the hot seat, and we've heard the Bob Myers rumors of the Sixers may be looking to bring in former Warriors general manager Bob Myers to replace Daryl Morey in the front office, but maybe he's feeling some heat, and maybe he's like, I got to do something to right this ship. And when it comes to the Warriors, what kind of assets would they have to make a trade to send back to the Sixers to entice them to send out Paul George? They got some young players, with Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, but they have some salaries as well, like an Andrew Wiggins, to make the money match. And so I saw this 3-team trade online on Twitter, and I think it satisfies all parties here, right? Sixers, Warriors, Heat. You get the Sixers getting in Jimmy Butler in this deal. We've talked about a potential Jimmy Butler acquisition for the Sixers, bringing him back to Philadelphia. And with Jimmy Butler right now, it's kind of been Phoenix or nothing where he wants to go. But Bradley Beal on the Suns is not willing to waive his no-trade clause, meaning where's Jimmy Butler going to go? Because unless Beal's in the deal, Jimmy can't go to Phoenix. Well, he hasn't said that he wouldn't want to go to Philadelphia as of this moment. So you get Jimmy Butler, you send Paul George to the Warriors, and then in return, the Heat get Andrew Wiggins, a young player, and Jonathan Kuminga, and then Dennis Schroeder to match the salary. I think that this deal kind of makes all 3 teams happy. I know Jimmy Butler, we talked about him on the show here. Some people don't want his antics in Philadelphia, but I think if you're willing to pay him the next couple seasons, which wouldn't be as much as Paul George for the next 3, I think he'd be happy here, and we know that him and Joel Embiid are very good buddies, very good friends, and I think Jimmy, a more reliable and dependable player when it comes to postseason play than Paul George has shown so far. So, what would you do if you were Daryl Morey, you're running the Sixers right now, and you have the ability to get off of Paul George's contract to whatever team it may be? Would you take advantage of that opportunity? Would you trade Paul George? Type K for keep, type T for trade. On what you would do with Paul George, let me know down in the comments section right now. Coming up next, we're going to get to some talk about Caleb Martin because there are some teams interested in potentially trading for Caleb Martin. But before we do, just another reminder, be sure to hit that sub button. These trade rumors are really heating up. This trade season wasn't supposed to be all that crazy, and then all of a sudden, boom, Luke Doncic traded. Boom, De'Aaron Fox traded. So we're seeing some movement now with the trade deadline just a few days away. Again, do not miss out. Hit that sub button. So getting to Caleb Martin now here on the show. There's been some rumors of some teams being interested in potentially trading for Caleb Martin. This coming from Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer, saying a source said the Lakers and the Kings are conducting due diligence on a potential trade for Caleb Martin. The source said the Miami Heat also contemplated reacquiring their former key role player, who's making $8.5 million this season. Personally, I am not trading Caleb Martin this season. Also, just 31 games played. He's been dealing with some injuries really ever since the start of the 2025 calendar year. But when he's been out there, 9 points, 4.5 rebounds, 43% from the field, 38 from 3. The numbers don't jump off the page, but he's never been the kind of player where you look at his stats and that's how you judge his play. He's always a guy that you have to watch the games to see the impact he's making. And just think back to the Boston Celtics game on Christmas Day, right? When the Sixers got that huge win and it felt like their season was getting turned around. Caleb Martin was tremendous. He does all the little things right, and that's the kind of player that championship teams need on their roster. And we know what he can do as well come playoff time, just going back to his time with the Miami Heat. There's a reason the Miami Heat are here interested in bringing him back, and contending teams like the Lakers and Kings want his services because he's the kind of player that winning teams value much more than teams that might be struggling in that department. And I always say this as well. You do not trade good players on affordable contracts. Getting players like Caleb Martin on the kind of deal he's on just does not happen very often. $8 million this year, $8.5 million next year, $9 million in 2026-27, and then $9.3 million in 27-28. He is a championship kind of player. He has championship DNA. He's been to the finals before. You do not get rid of talented players on affordable contracts, especially with the new CBA that the NBA has installed. You need these kind of guys that are lower salary guys that can make a real impact on your team, and that's why the Sixers need to keep Caleb Martin. There's no reason to trade him. It's not like he's an expiring deal and he can just walk in free agency. He's the kind of guy that has to stick around, and all signs right now point to the Sixers not being sellers and being, content and trying to compete for a playoff spot. Now, if they were just willing to punt on the season and tank and try to keep their draft pick, I could see maybe in that instance you do get some value for Caleb Martin. But everything we've heard is the Sixers are not going to just sit back and say, we'll try to keep our pick, we'll just tank, not try to win games. We got a report just the other day, the Sixers are looking to keep Gershon Yabusele long-term, who they've also received a ton of trade interest on, who his case is different because he is a free agent this offseason, and it's going to be difficult for the Sixers to keep him. But they've now come out and said, we want to keep Yabusele because he helps us win games. So, look, their direction is pretty clear to me right now. They want to compete for a playoff spot. They're not going to just tank and try to keep their top 6 protected pick because where they are in the standings, there's really no guarantee that even if they do try to lose some games, that they do keep that pick. And it could just go to OKC, they miss the playoffs, and they have nothing to show for it. And right now, the way the Eastern Conference is shaping up, at that 6 seed, remember, you need a top 6 seed to guarantee yourself a playoff spot. If you're in the number 7 through 10 seeds, you are in the play-in. Miami right now is a 6 seed, 24 and 24. Jimmy Butler's on his way out. That's a team that, depending on how that trade looks, if and when they do trade Jimmy, could drop a little bit in the standings. The Pistons, a 7 seed, 25 and 24. They're a very young, unproven team. Cade Cunningham has been amazing this year and an all-star for deserving reasons. But still, a lot of things that they need to show to be a good team come playoff time. The Magic, 8 seed, 24 and 26. They've had their fair share of injury issues with Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner missing a ton of time. The Hawks are the 9 seed, 22 and 27. Jalen Johnson, probably their second best player, out for the season. And they've really been struggling ever since he's gone out. They're probably going to continue to lose games. Bogdan Bogdanovic on the trade market for them. So they're selling a little bit. Then the Chicago Bulls are the 10 seed right in front of the Sixers at 21 and 29. They just traded Zach LaVine. And Nikola Vucevic is probably next. They're finally committing to bottoming out and trying to go with a little bit of a reset there in Chicago. So that's a team that I think you can very easily overtake. And then the Sixers at the 11 seed, 19 and 29. Look, you're just one game out of that number 10 seed, which is the last play-in spot, and you're just 5.5 games out of the 6 seed right now. They've been playing much better basketball as of late. They were on that 4-game win streak, and they had that really tough loss to the Denver Nuggets, a game that came down to the wire that they could have and probably should have won. And then the game against Boston the other day, where you were up as much as, I believe, 23 points in that third quarter, just dominating a fully healthy Boston Celtics team without Paul George and without Joel Embiid, and then you absolutely blew the game. But regardless, we have seen this team play good basketball in recent weeks and play good basketball against some of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. They beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. They beat the Boston Celtics on Christmas. And they've played very close games, including an overtime game against the New York Knicks. So those top 3 teams in the East, which is obviously who you're comparing yourself to for a potential first-round playoff matchup, you fared pretty well against. And if you can get healthy, and I know we keep saying this, if you can get healthy, if Embiid can get on the floor, because it is a big if, and if you can get Paul George back, I truly do believe this team has a chance. Now, Paul George and Joel Embiid, they could be back on the court as soon as the end of this week. So we've seen this team play good games against good teams, and we've seen what they can look like when everything comes together and Nick Nurse has his full crew out there. Justin Edwards has been a revelation for this squad. Ricky Council's been really good in spot minutes. Of course, Gershon Yabusele has been maybe the best story in the NBA all season long. So I think if you have moves you can make to upgrade the roster, and that could be trading Paul George for Jimmy Butler, I think you do it. I think you make a push for the playoffs, and you see where that takes you. Hopefully you can get the big fella back out there on the court ready to go. Before we hop on out of here, I want to hear from you down in the comments section. You can name one player that you want the Sixers to trade for, whether that's Jimmy Butler or someone else that we haven't talked about on today's show. Let me know. Again, deadline just 3 days away at this point, so things are really, really starting to heat up. Let me know who you think the Sixers trade for down in the comment section. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time here on 76ers Now.